I put a post on my Facebook page a few days ago asking you what you'd like me to demonstrate on my YouTube channel. There are lots of ideas, so thank you very much for all of those. I'm working my way through them. But the most popular one was a huge tote bag that I could throw all of my things in with lots and lots of pockets. So that's what I've made you. So you have a huge tote bag with a zip pocket on the front, and this is all fully lined, so you've got lots of different techniques to learn in here as well. There you go. We have elasticated pockets on either side, which is ideal. Maybe somewhere to keep your mobile phone or your cell phone, or even baby bottles would be perfect if you've got a baby bag. And then on the inside, you've got a separate zipped panel, so that makes it nice and secure. On the inside again, if you wanted to put more pockets in there, then you can do, maybe one in the same manner as the zip pocket on the front there. Now on top of all of that, I decided that as I've got lots of tote bags, this one's going to be a giveaway. So if you want to join me on my Facebook page, details will be on your screen now, and give me a like, give me a share, maybe give me a comment. Then I'll do a draw in a couple of weeks' time. I'll put the date on your screen as well when we're going to do that. So one of you, wherever you are in the world, is going to win the bag that I'm just about to show you how to make. So good luck with that. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't done already. But let's get on with some sewing. Now I've already cut out and started preparing all of the bits and bobs to make the bag, so I'll take you through all of the ingredients for your tote bag recipe. You'll need 2 pieces for the front and the back of the bag. Mine measure 16 inches by 13 inches. You can make these, of course, any size that you like, but you wanted a big bag, so we're going to have a big bag. So that's the front and back. The sides, therefore, need to measure the same as the depth of the bag, or the height of the bag, which is 13 inches. And I've made mine 5 inches deep, so it's a nice deep bag as well. And then the base of the bag measures the 16 inches across and 5 inches deep. Then you'll need to cut out exactly the same from lining. With the base of the lining, to be honest, I ran out of green fabric. But as I was rummaging through my stash trying to find some more, I had to find some quite thick canvas. So I'm using the lining in the green for the front and the back and for the sides. But for the base, I've got this stiff piece, so it's going to be a little bit more rigid in the base. On the back of all of the outer pieces, I've fused some fusible fleece. And this is just a heat and bond fusible fleece, which means you iron it onto the back of your fabric. You could use wadding, you could use a firmer type of wadding or batting or interfacing if you wanted a stiffer bag. But I think this is quite nice because it's still soft. You can still sew through it quite easily, but it does give your bag some shape. So that's all the pieces for the box shape of the bag. Let's just move those out of the way. Those are the sides. Then for the handles, I've cut 2 pieces of fabric measuring 26 inches in length, and they are 4 inches in width. And you can see here I've actually folded those in half and pressed, and then fold the outside pieces to the centre and press, and then fold the whole lot in half and press. And then you're going to stitch down both sides. I've already done one there, let's just show you already. So I'll do that in just a second. Those are the handles. Now there's a pocket on the front of the bag, remember. So for this pocket, I need 2 lining pieces. Let's move you out of the way. And those pieces actually measure 11 inches by 8 inches, and I've got an 8-inch zip to go across the centre. The zip panel that goes on the top of the bag, there's a lot of bits and bobs with this, isn't there? Is this. Now I've chosen a 19-inch zip. The top of the bag, remember, is 16 inches wide. The 19-inch zip is going to come up either side, so I can actually grab hold of it without it disappearing inside. So that's 19 inches. And then I have these panels, which are going to go either side of the zip. And there are 4 of them. And those measure... Oh, where are we? Those will measure 16 inches. I folded the ends over by 2.5 inches in depth, and again there are 4 of those. To go on the ends of the zip, I'm going to make some little tabs from this fabric. So I've just cut some strips. These measure 2 inches by 3 inches. Finally, the last one of all of your measurements and all of your bits and bobs are the elasticated pockets, which are going on either side of my bag. And I need 2 pieces of the outer fabric. I've got 2 pieces of lining with that as well, and mine measure 8.5 inches deep and 7.5 inches, 7 inches in width. So this goes on the side of the bag, and it's 2 inches wider than the actual side of the bag, because we're going to have a pleat in the bottom and we're going to have elastic in the top. I've already made one up, so that's what the pocket's going to look like. So what I'm going to do to start with is to finish off the strap. Then I'm going to sew the zip panel together. Then we'll put the zip pocket onto the front of the bag. We'll put the elasticated pockets onto the sides of the bag, and then we'll start to construct the whole thing. Right, so here we go. Now remember, I've already sewn down the sides of one of these, ever so easy, it's only a straight stitch. I haven't used any wadding or interfacing for the straps, so my straps are going to be quite soft. If you wanted them to be a little bit stiffer, then, oh sorry, just got the wrong foot pedal, bear with me a second. If you want them to be a little bit stiffer, then put some interfacing on there. If you use your fusible fleece on the back of the fabric, it will be, they'll be quite chunky, which is nice. I do that occasionally. So again, let's just sew straight down the side. Meeting. And I like to sew down both sides, even though it's not necessary, because it just gives a nice finishing touch. There you go. Off there, you under there. Whoops, come here. And then we'll sew down the other side. You could make your fabric a little bit stiffer by giving it a squirt of spray starch as you press it. That normally works. Or if you're using a fabric that's an upholstery-weighted fabric or curtain fabric, then that's going to be fine as well. I'm just using craft cotton for this one. But the nice thing about the bags is you can use practically any fabric that you like. So if you wanted to make this in an oilcloth, then that would be fantastic too. Right, I'll put those to one side for now. And let's do the second elasticated pocket that goes on the side. I'll show you how I did this. So I've got the outer fabric and the lining fabric, and I'm going to sew those right sides together across the top. I always use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, or the edge of the foot of my sewing machine, which may not be exactly a 1/4 inch, but as long as all the seams are the same, then that's fine by me. Oops, there we go. Just got my thread caught there. Let's move that out of the way. Now if the iron's on, I'd take this over to the iron and press it so that the seam is straight across the top. Then I haven't cut the elastic down to size, so I've actually just taken it straight out of the packet, so it's quite long. I'm going to open up the panel, put the elastic just to one side up against that seam, fold the pocket back down again, and then I'm just going to tack or baste right across the edge, like so. And then keeping that seam on the top and your elastic right up to the seam. I'm now going to sew a straight line underneath the elastic, but be really careful that you don't sew through it. And I just find this a little bit quicker and easier than making the channel and then getting the elastic and putting a safety pin on the end of it, or a bodkin and threading it through. So again, just make sure you don't sew over the elastic, otherwise that defeats the object somewhat. Okay. So just trim off the end of the elastic on the side there. Now then, I need to pull the elastic so that it actually measures the same as the side of the panel, which is 5 inches. So just pull. This is a lot easier if you do it flat. So if you've got a cutting mat, that's a good idea. A little bit more. So without stretching the top of the elastic, that now measures your 5 inches. Let's make this a little bit more even. And then again, I'm just going to tack right in the seam at the side, like so, to hold the elastic in place. And then we'll chop that off. Now I'm not going to tack or baste all the way around the edge here, but a little bit of a tip for you: if you have some repositionable adhesive, put a little squirt, this is just a 505, on the inside of the pocket, and then fold the pieces over just to hold those together before you put those into the sides of the bag. Right, and of course we've already done that with the other piece, and I've got 2 matching pockets that go on the side. Now let's take a look at the zip pocket that goes on the front of the bag. So I've got my 2 lining pieces and my 8-inch zip. The opening where the zip's going to go is going to measure 7 inches in length. Now I've already drawn a box onto one of the lining pieces which measures 7 inches by ½ an inch. There's also a line drawn down the centre which goes into a V shape into the corners at either end. This is 1½ inches from the top of the pocket, and it's sitting centrally, so the distance between either side here is exactly the same. So do make sure it sits in the middle when you draw your box. And I'm going to place this over the front of my bag, and again this needs to sit in the centre, like so. So don't put your pocket too close to the top of your bag, because this is going to interfere in your lining, and this is going to be a completely independent little pocket. So I'm going to place that here, and then I just need to make sure that the actual box is going to sit in the centre, because this after all is going to be on the front of my bag, so you're going to see this, so it needs to be straight and square and all proper. So 4½ inches from that side and 4½ inches from the other side, so that sits absolutely perfectly. So I'll put a few pins in there so it doesn't move, and then I'm going to use quite a small stitch on my sewing machine and just sew around that box. Oops. There we go. So it's number 2 on my machine, which is 2mm, and literally sew around the box shape. When you get to the end, or when you get to the corner, stop with the needle in the down position, right in that corner, then move down. Needle down, away we go. Keep your fabric nice and flat and your stitches really straight. This will be important when you fit the zip. Needle down. Just snip that thread off and take it out of the way. And then back to where I came from. So the pins come out. Right, now where that line was down the centre, I'm going to cut, and where the Y shape goes into the corners, I'm going to cut into the corners as well. So take a very sharp pair of scissors, cut straight down the centre. And cut into that corner as close as you can, but without actually cutting through the stitches. And that's important, because this will make sure that your corners are really nice and square and pointy when you turn them the right side out. So right into that corner, into that one. Lovely. Now when I say turn the right side out, that's what I'm going to do now. So take this lining piece and push it through to the other side. It may look a little bit wrinkly at the moment, but what I'm going to do now is to take this to the iron and press it so that that seam is sitting right on the edge. If I need to snip a little bit more into those corners just to make sure they're nice and pointy, then I'll do that as well. And then I'll come back in a second, we'll finish off the pocket. So there's my pocket from the lining side. Now I've popped it all through and pressed it, and that's what it's looking like from the front of the bag. So this is where I wanted the corners to be really nice and neat, because that's the bit that you're going to see. So now I need to put the zip behind there. So I'm going to place it face down with the slider facing outwards, so it's on the right side. I'm using a continuous zip. If you're using just a normal zip, you may find it easier to sew the ends of the zip together just to hold it in place while you're sewing. Now you can hand tack, and I normally do that, to be honest, but just for speed's sake I'm going to use a glue stick. This is a Prim Aqua marker, just to hold that in place. Any kind of glue that you're using on fabric, make sure that it's been designed to be used with fabric, because I'm going to sew through this and I don't want it to gunk up in my sewing machine. So I'm gluing around the edge. I know that's bright green, but it will go clear when it dries. Then I'm going to place the zip face down over the top of the hole, and then turn it over and just arrange it so that I know that it's sitting nice and square and centrally. Then I've put the zipper foot on the sewing machine, and we're going to sew all the way around the edge. Now remember, I shortened the length of the stitch when I was sewing around the hole. I'm going to make it back up to 2.5 now, and sew really carefully all the way around the edge. When I come to the end of the box, again stop with the needle in the down position so that you can turn it around. Don't worry about sewing over the coil of the zip. If you've got a metal zip, then don't, because you're going to break your needle on there. But nylon zips, you should be absolutely fine. And let's go back down. Oops, that was a little bit wobbly. Back down this side. If you get a little bit close to the slider of the zip, leave the needle in the down position. Then you can lift the foot up and manoeuvre this out of the way, then put the foot back down again, then carry on. So nice and neatly all the way round into that corner, needle down, spin it around across the end, and back to where we started. Okay, and snip off my threads. Then we'll need the back of the pocket. So again, that's how we're looking now from the front. So I've got a nice zip opening. So take the second side of your pocket, plonk it on the top, and put a few pins in there to hold it together. Just pin through the fabric pieces, the pocket pieces, not into the actual front of the bag, because we don't want to see stitches on the outside. And then we're going to sew all the way around the edge. And as I'm sewing, I want to move the bag out of the way, so I'm only sewing through the pocket lining pieces. Oh, let's put the regular foot back on the machine again. I've finished with the zip foot now. Are you on? Yes. And away we go. Just need to knock all my fabric off the edge of the table. Okay, so as we come around again, just make sure that all your fabric's moved out of the way. My pins are well out of the way as I'm sewing, but if I do approach a pin, then do try and make sure that you take them out. I always tend to pin it across the seam just in case the needle hits the pin by accident. And then it's less likely that you're going to break the needle or the pin. But it's always as well to take the pins out as you're sewing, because if they do happen to break, you don't know where they're going to fly off to. Okay, into the corner there. Almost there. Too close to the edge. There we go. Take you out now. You go out of the way. And there we go. And that, off you go, is my front pocket finish. So that's the front of my bag now. And I've got a really neat pocket that when I open it up, I've got that nice contrasting coloured lining on the inside. So we've got the side pockets done, we've got the front pocket done. Let's do that zip panel that goes into the top of the lining. And here we are. Excuse me. Now these 4 pieces of fabric, I've already folded the ends over by ½ inch and pressed it. And it's really important that these work out now to be all exactly the same length, because you'll notice if they're not. So I'm going to turn them around so that they're kind of facing each other. They're a mirror image of each other. And the zip goes down the centre like so. So I'll do the tabs in just a second. Because I'm using an invisible zip, I can actually move that slider right out of the way as I'm sewing. Just to make it a bit easier to sew around. Make sure it doesn't come right off the end though. And then we'll place this right sides down over one of the pieces of fabric. Now I tend not to pin because I find it easier not to. If you want to put lots of pins in there, that's entirely up to you. I like to sew from the zip side up because on most nylon zips you'll find that there's like a different weave right down the centre of the zip tape, and that I know is in the middle, so that's where I'm going to sew. And I'm going to keep the ends of that fabric folded over as I'm sewing. So we will need the zipper foot back on my machine again. Make sure that the zip is the same distance from either end of the fabric. Line up the 2 edges of the fabric like so, or the zip and the fabric, sorry. And again, we'll sew straight down the centre. Oops. Make sure when you get to the second end that the end is folded over again. So that's one side. Then I'll need another piece on the opposite side. So with the zip sandwiched in the centre, I want to sew 2 pieces of fabric together. But now I can't see where the stitches were and I can't see where the zip is. So you'll find it easier to start on the other side. Just snip these threads off, make that a little bit neater. Line up the 2 folded sides of the fabric. I can see where I've sewn from this side, so I'm going to sew straight over the top of that same line of stitching. That moved a little bit as I was sewing, so I'm going to unpick that and just do it again. Careful not to cut through your fabric. And use your quick unpick if you don't have a pair of really sharp little scissors to hand. Okay, let's do it again. So line up the edges, and this time we'll hold them together. Looking good. Now when I come up to the ends again, I just want to make sure that those ends that I folded over and pressed are the same length. They seem to look pretty good. If they're not, just fold one of them over till they are. There we go. So that's what I'm looking at the moment, and that's the top of my zip panel. And then I need to do the same with the opposite side. So that needs to go right sides together over here. Oh, actually, let's just make sure, no, that the pattern is facing each other. So that's how we're going to look. Now flip that over. There we go. And again, I find it easy to sew on the zip side so I can see where I'm going. So this time again, just take a little time to trim back your threads, to line up the ends of the fabric so they're all meeting. And sew. And then we'll do exactly the same with the other side of the fabric, on the other side of the zip. And then I'll give it a light press. Try and avoid the coil of the zip when you're pressing. I've never had one melt, to be honest, but you have to save that, don't you? Okay, do those all meet up? Yes, they do. So that's how we're looking now. So now the final piece has to go on this side to sandwich that zip in the centre. So just like we did before, line up the edges of the fabric together. I'll trim all those threads off in just a second. Sew over the top of the first stitch line. Hold all these together. Almost there. Make sure these line up. Perfect. There. Right. So now I've got a complete panel. So go and give that a quick press when you're doing it at home. And that's what's going to sit in the middle of my lining. But I don't want to see these raw edges, so this is the clever bit. So I'll need to sew this section here, right sides together with that section. And that's doable, but I need to sew around the opposite side of the zip. So I'm going to roll over the bottom two pieces of the zip, like so. Take this piece, wrap it over, wrap that piece over, and now they are right sides together. And trim those off a bit. Okay, so right sides together with the whole of the zip and the other half of the zip all stuffed in the middle. And then we're going to sew down the edge. Line up those two folded edges again. Make sure that you take your zipper foot off and put your regular foot back on again, because that works better. Make sure you line up the folded edges here, and back tack. Not always necessary, but here it is, because I'm going to turn this whole thing through in just a second. There'll be a lot of fabric I'm folding through. So as I'm sewing down the edge, I'm just pushing all the rest of the zip out of the way. Remember to make sure that you're not sewing through any of that zip. It's all rolled out of the way. And just cut my threads off. Okay. And back tack at the ends. Right. So now I need to turn this the right side out. So pull the zip and the opposite side of the zip panel through. Just keep pulling, it will work. Here it comes. There we go. So that's the one side. Then we need to do the same with the opposite side. So again, roll this bit out of the way, the bit that you've just sewn, and then we'll fold the other two pieces of fabric so they're right sides together. So again, that piece that I've just sewn is right in the middle, zips in the middle here, roll those two pieces over and sew down the edge. So just lining up the edges. Again, if you prefer to pin, then pin away. I prefer not to, I find it quicker. Making sure that's tucked out of the way inside. So just coming up to the final bit here. Back tack. And then we'll pull this side through. It's quite satisfying when you finish this and it works. Okay, so, oh, that is quite by coincidence that my trees have lined up. That was an accident, but it looks good and I should have thought about that beforehand. So there's my zip panel. So I do need to press this now before I sew. So I'll take this to the iron, give it a press, and I'm going to top stitch across the end here, down the side of the zip, down to the other end here, and across the end. So basically the seam on the edge, I'm not going to top stitch that because that's the bit that's going to be sewn into the linings. And then do the same on the other side there. And then we'll make the tabs and then we'll fit it into the lining. So there's my panel, almost finished. I have put one of the tabs on the end, but I'll show you how I did that in just a second. And I've top stitched all the way around the edge as well, so it looks really neat. So the little tab that goes on the end, you can actually buy some metal pieces that screw onto the end, which look really nice. But if you can't find any, this is the way to do it. So take your tab fabric, fold over the end of that by about ½ inch, and press it. And the same with the other side, so that's wrong sides together. And then you're going to fold the whole thing in half, so you've got a nice neat edge here, that's where the tab's going to go, and sew down either side. Like so. Oops, there you are. There. And then off with all these little threads. Just snip a little bit of the fabric from the corners here. And then turn it the right side out. And you've got a little pocket that you can slip the end of the zip into. I'll just use my screwdriver because I've got that to hand just to push out those corners. There. And then that should fit perfectly over the end of your zip, like so. And then you're going to sew all the way around it in a box shape. Now this is quite helpful as well. If you put a little bit of your glue stick onto the end of your zip, it'll hold it in place while you're sewing, because it does want to, oh, there you go, waste not, one not. It does want to move a little bit when you're sewing it, so it just keeps it in place. So again, that will slip over the end of your zip like so. And then we'll sew in a box. Push it right in, that'll do. So try and keep this nice and neat. To give it a nice professional finish. Snip off my thread again. Oh, and another one there. Oh, come on. Got you. Right. And then back down to where I came from. Right, so that's the zip panel finished. So that now needs to go into the lining. So take one of your lining pieces, and this needs to sit quite centrally across here. And then we're going to top stitch. So just to make sure that I get this in the right position, I'm going to draw a line where that's going to be sewn. And mine is going to be 2.5 inches from the top of the bag. And that sits on here. There should be enough room at the sides for a seam allowance, because we don't want that overlapping. So I'm going to line that up to the edge here. I'll pin it in place before I sew, and then we'll sew straight across. Then we'll draw the line on the other side of the bag as well, and we'll match that up. Right, so that's how we're looking now. So I've sewn in the one side across the line on the front of my lining. So now I need to sew the opposite side, just move that out of the way, to the opposite side of the lining, like so. So I've already drawn the line on there. And let's line up those two edges like so. And we'll have a few pins, so that it's sitting in the same position on this side of the lining that it did on the other one. And then we'll sew it. Right, whoops. So I'm sewing quite close to the edge here as well. It's only about 1/4 of an inch, sorry, 1/8 of an inch away from the edge, because I just want to hold the sides on here. Okay, back down to the end, and we'll back tack. So that's the middle bit of the bag now. So those are the two sides, so it's going to sit inside like that. So now we'll put on the sides of the lining. Need to make sure that all of this is kept out of the way again, so I don't want to sew through it. So let's take one of the side pieces and right sides together. There's no right and wrong sides with my fabric, but you have to say it, don't you? We'll sew the two long edges of the lining together. And again, if you're a beginner, you may want to pin this. There we go. Right, so that's how we're looking. There's the side piece. That's the end I've just sewn on. So I need to sew this together to make a box shape. So you can see it starting to take shape already. You can tell how it's going to look. Bit of thread there. Right, so that's one end. So you can see that's how my lining is going to look now. So I've got something to grab hold of when I undo the zip, but it's pretty secure there. And then we'll do the same with the opposite end of the lining. Make sure you're not sewing across the end of that tab. Push it out the way. And then the final side is sewn together, and then we've just got to put the base in. There you go. So that's what my lining is looking like now. There's my panel in the centre. Now I need to sew the base. Remember, the base on mine is canvas to make it nice and sturdy. Now I've got a trick for you here. When you start to sew in the base, it's very tempting to start sewing or start pinning the base in from that seam in the corner. Don't overlap it so that the two edges of the base are actually lined up. So in effect, you're going to start sewing 1/4 of an inch in from the end. And we need to sew this all the way around, but leave a gap in one side of about 8 inches on this one. Leave a big gap so you can turn it all the right side out. So when I come up to the other end here, this will overlap again, so that I stop sewing 1/4 of an inch from the corner there. So I'm pinning this just so that I know that that's going to fit perfectly. And then I'm going to sew all the way around and again leave that nice big gap just on the end here so I can turn the whole thing the right side out. The final corner. And that's the lining section finished. So there's my gap in the lining. That's the whole of the lining part of my bag finished. there you can see inside, that's actually nice and secure because it's a really nice tight fit inside the bag. You can make that a little bit shorter if you prefer to, but I kind of like that because nobody can get their hands in without the zip being open. And when you do open the zip, you've got a really nice wide bag inside. So I'm just going to fit the elasticated panels to the sides and we'll start to construct the whole bag now. So that's going to go to one side for a moment. And let's take a look at those elasticated side panels. So that's the pocket that I made earlier on, remember? I'll just clean my mess up a little bit. This is going to go to the bottom of the side panel. So I know it's going to be too wide. Remember, this is a couple of inches wider than the fabric. But line one side up and we're just going to do a tacking or a basting stitch just down that side to hold it together. So this is going to be within the seam allowance, okay? So just line that up. Lovely. And you go and sew. So just make sure that the two pieces of fabric are raw edges together and really close to the edge of the fabric here, you know, 1/8 of an inch maximum. Just help that over the elastic, okay? Then on the second side, remember we pulled the elastic till it was 5 inches, so that should sit really nicely here. And we'll tack down that side in the same way. Now then, the pocket's too big at the bottom. So what I'm going to do, I'm not measuring and marking with this one because I can kind of tell my eye that it's going to look good. I'm going to form 2 pleats facing outwards, the same distance from the seam either side. I'll have a pin in there. And another one facing this way. So then the bottom of the panel all matches up and I've got 2 pleats in it that look like that. Don't be too concerned about being absolutely perfect with these. No one's going to come around and measure the pockets on the side of your bag. So as long as they look right, they're all right. And again, we'll sew straight across the bottom here, just to hold those in place. And then out come your pins. So there's the side panel. I've already finished the other one, so those 2 are now ready to be put into the bag. So let's start putting this bag together. Take your 2 outer panels. Remember, one's got the zip pocket and one hasn't. Take the handles that you've made and we're going to pin those facing inwards just to either side of the zip. And they should be symmetrical because your zip is central. You can measure that if you want to, just make sure they're sitting in the right place. So just put a couple of pins in there and then we'll sew it. Just again in the seam allowance, this is purely so that I'm not working around pins. So they can come out now. And then we'll take the opposite side of the bag, make sure the fabric's facing in the same direction. Whoops, nearly. You go there. And line the 2 pieces up so that you can apply the handles to the second half in exactly the same position. And just try and make sure that they're not twisted as you put these on. and then your pins can come out. Okay, so now we're ready to put the sides of the bag on. So this is very much in the same way as you did with the lining pieces. So take one of the side panels, right sides together with the side of the bag and sew. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to sew this panel in, sew the back panel, sew the other side panel, so I've got a tube, and then we'll sew the base in the same way. So I'll stop talking for a minute because we're going to really speed this up and go fast in just a second. So just bear with me while we sew the whole thing together. Right, so that's the outside of my bag. Let's turn it the right side out and see how we're looking. There we go, so there is one big tote bag, zip panel, pockets on the side, zip panel to go on the inside, so we need to put the lining together with the exterior of the bag now. So these two pieces need to go together, so the right sides are together. So the lining actually stays this way out, and we're going to put the whole of the bag inside the lining. So now my right sides are together. Make sure that the handles are tucked inside. Match up your side seams here. So we'll have a few pins there. One in the middle. And then we're simply going to sew all the way around the top. And remember I left that turning gap in the bottom of the lining so I could turn it all the right side out. We'll do that in just a second. Okay, so make sure the handles are out of the way. We don't want to be sewing those into the seam. There's another side seam. I don't tend to finish off my edges on bags like this because probably not going to go in the wash. These are more like a spot clean if you need to, and you can always give them a spray with some protective fabric spray as well. So there's little chance of any of this fraying any more than it actually is. But if you wanted to, if you've got some fabric that does fray heavily and you're worried about it, just go over the seams with a zigzag stitch on your sewing machine. Right. Now if you have a free arm on your sewing machine, it would be an idea to take it off now, you may find that easier, and slide the bag over the free arm, and then we're simply going to sew all the way around the top. Bet you wish you could sew as fast as that. So put the accessory compartment back on again and turn the whole thing the right side out through that nice big turning gap that I left in the bottom. It's looking really good. Okay, then I have a hole So I need to sew the hole closed. So if you take the two sides of the hole and pull it towards you, the raw edges kind of fold in all by themselves. And I'm just going to top stitch straight across the top of that edge. So start slightly off the edge of the fabric, fold the two ends in so that they meet, and then sew straight across. Keep that nice and tight. And back off the opposite side. Trim my threads. Okay, nearly there. And then you'll push the lining inside the bag. This will all need ironing in a minute. And then just to keep all of the layers together, I'm going to top stitch all the way around that top seam. So roll that so that the edge is there. That can come off again. And so with the handles sticking up this time, because that's going to help them stay in place. Right. So I'm just going to keep folding the edge so that I know that that seam is sitting right on the edge. Could do a slightly longer stitch around here as well, because this is just decorative. So gently over the seams, because there's a lot of fabric there now. You can imagine when you've got the seams and all of the wadding there. And just keep rolling this round. And over that seam. So here's the front. Just keep rolling and folding. Could have pressed this. May make it a little bit easier if you iron this before you stitch. But there I was just being a little bit impatient. There we go. That's it. Over that lumpy seam again. There we go. Just tidy these threads up as I go. Almost finished. There. And we're just about back to the beginning. Pick that tack, lift that up, snip off these bits. Whoops. You out the way. And we're finished. It does need a press. I'll do that later. But basically, you can see you've got this huge tote bag with the really handy zip pocket right there at the front, with your elasticated pockets either side like so. And then on the inside, there's your zip panel that you can grab the end of just to close that zip over to make it nice and secure. So I hope you find it useful, and I hope you enjoy making yours.